Assalamu alaikum students. Our today topic is Egyptian civilization. This is the part 1 of Egyptian civilization. Nile River. The longest river in the world flows north from the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. Its floodplain was a magnet for life. The Nile River was the highway that joined the country together. Up until the 19th century, travel by land was virtually unknown. Since there are no forests in Egypt, wood was brought from Lebanon. Acacia wood was used in Lower Nubia to build the boats that transported granite for the construction of pyramid. Today, the Filuka, a small open sailboat, is a common mode of transporting people and goods on the Nile. A variety of domesticated animals were raised due to this river. The Nile River Valley is truly a gift to Egypt. Without its water and rich soil, the Egyptian civilization would not have emerged. Ancient Egypt, a land of mysteries. The civilization of ancient Egypt is known for its stupendous achievements in a whole range of fields, including art and architecture, engineering, medicine, and statecraft. The civilization of ancient Egypt was one of the earliest in the world history. It is usually held to have begun around 3000 BC. Categories of stable kingdom. The history of the ancient Egypt grew up with a series of stable kingdoms. Historian had divided this series or periods of kingdom into three categories, such as Old Kingdom of the Early Bronze Age, Middle Kingdom of the Middle Bronze Age, and New Kingdom of the Late Bronze Age. It was during these times that ancient Egypt was at its strongest. The times between the kingdoms are called intermediate periods. These are the achievements of Egyptian civilization. Egyptian men and women wore makeup. It was thought to have healing powers. Plus, it helped protected their skin from the sun. They used moldy bread to help with infections. They were one of the first civilization to invent writing. They also used ink to write and paper called papyrus. The ancient Egyptians were scientists and mathematicians. They had numerous inventions, including ways to build buildings, medicine, cosmetics, the calendar, the plow for farming, musical instruments, and even toothpaste. Ancient Egypt plays a major role in the Bible. Moses helped them escape and led them to the promised land. The Pharaoh kept his hair covered. It was not to be seen by regular people. Cats were considered sacred in ancient Egypt. Upper and Lower Egypt. The Nile River flows from south to north, emptying into the Mediterranean Sea at the Nile Delta. The northmost part of the Nile, begin the end of the river, is referred to as a Lower Egypt. This was one of Egypt's early kingdoms, known at the time as the Black Land. To their south, near the origins of the Nile, was Upper Egypt. It was known as the Red Land. Red Land and Black Land. You can see the slide. Please read it. Then see the image. Divisions of kingdom. The archaeologists have realized that the ancient Egyptian history could be divided into three separate periods: the Old, New, and Middle Kingdom. Old Kingdom. During the Old Kingdom period, Egypt was largely unified as a single state. It gained in complexity and achievement and expanded military. Old Kingdom rulers built the first pyramids, which were both tombs and monuments for the kings who had them built, building monumental architecture such as the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx in Giza. Giza is the name of place. And temples for different gods require a centralized government that could command vast resources. At that time, pharaohs had enjoyed the absolute power. Huge number of pyramids were built. They built at Giza of Egypt. First step pyramid built by King Djoser. Pyramids were built with limestone, burial chambers built with granite, and outer casting were carved out of fine limestone. Even today, the archaeologists and scientists are unable to discover the actual process of building such great pyramids. The next one is Middle Kingdom. Middle Kingdom saw Egypt unified again as kings found ways to take back power from regional governors. From the Middle Kingdom forward, Egyptian kings often kept well trained standing armies. The ability of the Egyptian state to create and maintain a standing military force and to build fortification showed that it had regained control of substantial sources. Political fragmentation led to the Second Intermediate Period. The precise dates are unclear, even though writing allowed for more events to be recorded. Most things still were not, and many more records have been lost or destroyed. The New Kingdom. Around 1550 BC, the New Kingdom period of Egypt history began with the expulsion of the Hyksos from Egypt and restored centralized political control. This period was Egypt's most prosperous time and marked the peak of its power. Also, in this period, Hesh- Hatshepsut, Egypt's most famous female ruler, established trade networks that helped build the wealth of Egypt and commissioned hundreds of construction projects and pieces of statuary, as well as an impressive mortuary temple at Dir el Bahri. She also ordered repair to temples that had been neglected or damaged during the period of Hyksos rule. The term pharaoh, which originally referred to the king's palace, became a form of address for the king himself during this period, further emphasizing the idea of divine kingship. Religiously, the pharaohs associated themselves with the god Amun Ra while still recognizing other deities. Government. Ancient Egypt could not have achieved such stability and grandeur without the cooperation of all levels of the population. The pharaoh was at the top of the social hierarchy. Next to him, the most powerful officers were the viziers, the executive heads of the bureaucracy. Under them were the high priests, followed by royal overseers, administrators, who ensured that the government 42 district governors carried out the pharaoh's orders. At the bottom of the hierarchy were the scribes, artisans, farmers, and laborers. Religion was divided in myths, gods, kingship, and priests in Egyptian era. What was myth? It all began with the first stirring of the high god in the primeval waters. The earth was created out of cause by the god Atum, Atum. Atum is the name of God. The earth was seen as a sacred landscape, a reflection of the sky world where the gods reside. Gods and goddess. There are large number of gods. For example, Ra. Ra was the sun god and the most important god to the ancient Egyptians. Ra was said to have created all forms of life and was the supreme ruler of the gods. Next one is Isis was the mother goddess. It was thought that she would protect the and help people in need. And next one is Osiris. Osiris was ruler of the underworld and god of the dead. Horus was the god of the sky. Thoth was the god of knowledge. He blessed the Egyptians with writing, medicine, and mathematics. And then, what was kingship? Kings were considered divinely appointed representatives of the god on earth. If they did not conduct the affair of state in a wise and just manners, they would not be admitted into the Holy Land when they died. And what were priests? Priests work at the temples, conducting the daily rituals of clothing, feeding, and putting to bed the sculpted images that represented the deities to whom the temples were dedicated. The higher ranking priests were called the first servants of the god, and lower ranking ones performed various duties such as studying and writing. These are some images of their gods and their names. Social classes or social hierarchy. The pharaoh was at the top. Next to him, the most powerful officers were the viziers, the executive heads of the bureaucracy. Then were the high priest, followed by the royal overseers. At the bottom of the hierarchy were the scribes, artisans, farmers, and laborers. This is the pyramid of social classes, division of social classes. What were pharaohs or what was their role? The word comes from Bible, first used by Joseph and Moses in the second book of Kings. Pharaohs began ruling Egypt in 3000 BC. The Upper and Lower Egypt were united at that time. The pharaoh was assisted by a hierarchy of advisors, priests, administrators, etc., believed to be ruler, priest, god, rule on earth. In the Old Kingdom, they were considered themselves to be living gods who ruled with absolute power. They built pyramids as testimony of their greatness but left no official records of their achievements. And in Middle Kingdom, the pharaohs no longer considered themselves to be living gods, but rather the representatives of the gods on earth. They left record of their deeds, but these were no more than a string of titles and laudatory epithets. These are the symbols of pharaohs. On the right side, there are sculptures of pharaohs. Royal woman. Royal mothers, wives, and daughters derived their statues from their relationship with the king. Kings had many wives, and royal families were large. The most prolific was Ramesses II, who had 8 wives and over 100 children. To keep the royal bloodline pure, kings often married within their families, a sister or half sister, for example. In a few cases, they married their daughters, although it is not clear whether or not these marriages were true conjugal unions. These are the images of royal women. These are some popular symbols which were used by pharaohs and other Egyptians. Ankh in the shape of a mirror or a knot. The ankh is a symbol of life. It was often carried by deities or people in a funeral procession or offered to the king as the breath of life. Kartosh, a kartosh is an elliptical outline representing a length of rope that enclosed the name of royal persons in hieroglyphs. It symbolizes the pharaoh's statues as ruler of all that the sun encircled. Bureaucracy. Please read the slides, students. As the supreme judge of the state, the vizier ruled on all petitions and grievances brought to the court. All royal commands passed through his hands before being transmitted to the scribes in his office. They in turn dispatched orders to the heads of distant towns and villages and dictated the rules and regulations related to the collection of taxes. Army. The military took part in warfare and trade missions, helping to maintain Egypt's and expand its territories. The desert and the Mediterranean gave the country a natural means of protection. Still, invasions did occur. In the Old Kingdom, the small military units were reinforced by farmers when necessary. During times of internal instability, private armies were established, which included non Egyptian mercenaries. During the reign of Ramesses II in New Kingdom, vast improvements were made in military technology and tactics. The Narmer plate is the earliest artifact depicting an Egyptian king wearing the crown of both Upper and Lower Egypt. It commemorates King Narmer's victory over Lower Egypt and the subsequent union of and Lower Egypt in the late pre dynastic period. Mummification. The earliest ancient Egyptians buried their dead in small pitches in the desert. Sand hydrated the bodies quickly, creating natural mummies. Later, the ancient Egyptians began burying their dead in coffins to protect them from wild animals in the desert. For example, the body had to be preserved through mummification and given a properly furnished tomb with everything needed for life in the afterworld. What material was used in mummification? Linen, sawdust, beeswax, resin, natron, onion, Nile mud, linen pads. These were used in process of mummification. And what was their purpose? The purpose of mummification was to keep the body intact so it could be transported to a spiritual afterlife. This practice reached its height during the 11th and 12th centuries. There are three elements to the Egyptian concept of the soul: they Ka, Ba, and Ah, AKH. Ah. The royal Ka symbolizes a pharaoh's right to rule, a universal force that passed from one pharaoh to the next. Ba is represented as a human headed bird that leaves the body when a person dies. The face of Ba was the exactly same of the deceased person. A concept of light spirit of a person that becomes one with light after death. Life after death, the concept of life after death, the journey to the afterworld was considered full of danger. The mummy passed through the underworld, which have long knives, fire spitting dragons, and reptiles with five heads. Upon arriving, the deceased had to pass through seven gates, reciting accurately a magic spell. If successful, they arrived at the Hall of Osiris, the place of judgment. Here, the gods of the dead performed the weighing of the heart ceremony. The person's heart was then placed on a scale and balanced by a feather that represented the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was equal in weight to the feather, the person reached, otherwise, the person would not survive in the afterlife. This was the concept of their life after death. These are the symbols of process of mummification, their coffin and their process. We will study next features in the part 2 of Egyptian civilization. Thank you, students.